Hey guys, and welcome back for another video. With this series, I'd like to talk to you guys about fractals individually, quickly, and at their easiest level. For those of you guys out there who are looking to do fractals at the master level, I'll be leaving links into the description of each of these videos from a YouTuber named Dredge, who has made some fantastic and very detailed guides on the hardest version or the master tier fractals of the Mist. So whether you came here looking for a higher level guide or you play through this guide and want to know what it's like at some of the higher levels, you were pretty much covered. At the start of this fractal, when your party is ready, head forward and a bit to the right from where you spawn in. Here you'll find your first group of dredge enemies, and we can start to talk about the types of dredge that you'll need to fight in this fractal. For this first group, the only thing you really need to worry about is the Dredge Protector. This enemy doesn't do any damage on its own, but it can make other dredge invulnerable, so you want to deal with the Dredge Protector anytime you see one. Once you've dealt with the Dredge Protector, you can just take out the rest of the dredge as they're not much of a threat, and move on to your second group of enemies. Much like the first, the second group of enemies is mostly made up of regular dredged, but you'll also encounter an elite smoke shaman. This enemy has the ability to throw some smoke fields on the ground that will deal damage over time if you stand in them, and will also apply some blinds. For this second group of enemies, I'd make sure to take that out first, and then you can deal with the rest of the dredge. Head a little further down the path and you'll reach your third group of enemies. You may notice this next group of enemies has two Molten Protectors, and yes, they can defend one another. If you should find yourself in this situation, just be sure that you attack some of the other enemies, and the protectors should shift their focus long enough for you to take them out. In addition to several other regular dredge, you'll see an elite Molten Brawler. This enemy has similar attacks to one of the final bosses for this fractal, so it's a good idea to take him out before dealing with the other dredge. But if you happen to notice some shockwaves knocking you and your party members down, that is the Molten Brawler. Once you've dealt with the Molten Brawler, the protectors, and the rest of the dredge, you can head along down the path once more. Here you'll see a bridge going across some lava with several AoEs going off every now and again. Here your best bet is just to try and weave through those AoEs until you make it to the next platform with some more dredge enemies. Among these dredge enemies, you're going to see an elite Molten Flame Shaman, as well as a Dredge Resonator. These enemies tend to go hand in hand because the Dredge Resonator is going to guard the Flame Shaman until you've dealt with him first. So make sure you take out that Dredge Resonator before turning your attention to that elite Molten Flame Shaman and quickly cleaning up the rest of the dredge. Here you can carry along down the path until it opens up into a larger room where there are quite a few dredge enemies to take on. Most notably among them, there's one Dredge Protector that you'll probably want to take out before any of the other enemies, as well as one very large Flame Effigy. Again, it's probably a good idea to take the Protector out first, and then depending on the strength of your party, you might just be able to focus that Flame Effigy, but if that's not the case, feel free to take out as many of the other dredge as you feel necessary to safely complete the rest of this fight. As for the Molten Flame Effigy itself, well, this enemy does have the same shockwave ability that the later boss has, as well as those Molten Brawlers, so be sure to keep that break bar broken by using your crowd control abilities to prevent this from going off too many times. On the easier levels, you shouldn't really struggle with much of this fight, just make sure you don't get overwhelmed by all of these enemies. Defeating the Molten Flame Effigy will get you a chest, and then you can move on to your next group of enemies. This sixth group of enemies is going to have a Dredge Protector, a Molten Smoke Shaman, and a Molten Brawler. Here, just like with previous encounters, you want to take out that Protector first, and for the other two more notable enemies, you could divide your party's attention between the Brawler and the Smoke Shaman. The order of this doesn't matter so much, but it will depend on the strength of your party. In other words, just make sure to focus whichever enemy seems to be giving your party the most grief. After dealing with those enemies, as well as the remaining dredge, you can move further down the path until you reach yet again another group of enemies. This time it's going to be one regular group of dredge, a Dredge Protector, and one Dredge Mining Suit. Like all the other encounters, be sure to take out that Protector first, and if you're lucky, you'll be able to group up those regular dredge with that Dredge Mining Suit, and you'll be able to take these guys down with some AoE no problem. If not, I would recommend taking out the Dredge Mining Suit because it does a little bit more damage than the average dredge, and then cleaning out the rest of the dredge. With those enemies dealt with, you can continue down the path until you encounter your 8th and final group of dredge enemies, and this time they're actually just a group of regular dredge, so feel free to just damage them until they're all finally defeated. Once the last dredge has been defeated, a bridge between you and the circular platform nearby will open, and you can walk that bridge to get to the circular platform or the arena where you'll be facing 2 bosses for this fractal: the Molten Berserker and the Molten Firestorm. The Molten Berserker is pretty familiar at this point because he does a lot of those shockwave attacks I was talking about earlier in this guide. The shockwaves can be dodged or jumped over. The shockwaves that appear white and on the ground are the ones that you'll want to jump over and try to dodge, but the Molten Berserker also does an aerial shockwave that appears in blue. The other boss, or the Molten Firestorm on the other hand, is a flying boss, and while it does this, it shoots some pretty large fire AoEs on the ground that do tend to stick around for a while, so just be sure to avoid those whenever you can. Each time either one of these bosses loses 25% of their total health, the other boss will become enraged, increasing their rate of attack as well as their overall damage. The typical strategy for dealing with these bosses is to focus one until it's completely defeated. Much like the enrage mechanic from earlier, when one of these bosses falls, the other one will regain all of its health as well as some of the abilities from the boss you just defeated. But at the same time, any dead players on the ground will be revived at full health to complete the rest of this fight. Now, the boss that you want to take out is going to depend on the party. I know a lot of people have a good idea of which boss is the right boss, but I'm just going to explain what happens when you take out either one of these bosses so you're prepared for whatever party situation you find yourself in. So if you should choose to take out the Molten Berserker first and fight the Molten Firestorm for the rest of the fight, the Molten Firestorm will create a windstorm around the outside edge of the circular platform you're on. Standing in any of that wind will pull you towards the edge, so be sure to keep your distance, and at the same time try to keep your party centered in that circle as best you can so that that boss is going to stay in the center as well. In my experience, it seems that the Molten Firestorm will hover around whichever player is farthest away from the rest, so by standing closer to the center, the boss will be forced to come to the center away from that outer ring of wind, and you'll be able to defeat him more easily. If you should choose to take out the Molten Firestorm and fight the Molten Berserker for the rest of this fight, the Molten Berserker will get an improved stomp ability that not only does more damage, but often causes debris to fall from the sky, dealing some additional damage to you and your party. Just as when dealing with both of these bosses at the same time, you're gonna want to make sure you're dodging and jumping those shockwaves, and additionally you want to make sure that you keep that break bar of his broken and deal as much damage as you can during those break bar phases. If I had any additional advice for this fractal, it would be to use the Control-T or Call Target function to pick out any dredge you're trying to take out on the way to the bosses. And once you do make it to the pair of bosses, be sure your party is clear as to which enemy you'd like to take out first, so nobody accidentally deals 25% damage to the other boss, which of course will enrage it and make the fight a little bit more difficult. That being said, when your team does decide on a boss to defeat and you've successfully defeated the final form of whichever boss you ended up on, you'll finally be done with the Molten Boss Fractal. To anyone out there struggling with the Molten Boss Fractal, I hope you found this helpful. As always guys, thank you so much for watching these, and I'll see you in the next one.